seldom that individuals have an impact on your worldview in a short space of time. And after having dinner with both Mike and Roman, I must say that they've opened up entire new worlds in terms of how I see things, and the absolute genius that they've deployed in their careers, but also in the startups that they work with. So Roman was telling me a story about 2 or 3 of the companies he invested in, and it left me flabbergasted. Normally I like to pride myself about being on the cutting edge of ideas and following trends, but I must say I was quite speechless after he gave me a couple of things that he's investing in. And I haven't even read about it anywhere, so it ought to say that he's really on the cutting edge of things. It's an absolute honor that he flew all the way from America to be here to give some of the ideas to you. And I wish I had that opportunity when I was younger, listening to things, but it is still an honor for me to be sitting in on this. Just a brief introduction. You've got 30 years of experience, 15 years as a venture capitalist and 15 years as a company builder. He was a futurist at Nokia, working for a number of venture capital investments for Nokia way back. He left them 13 years ago and became a venture capitalist. He's also the author of a number of books, of which I, for example, have subscribed in some of my courses on the Next Generation Network course. I did a Telcom a few years ago. I was quite surprised to see that he was an author on a number of them. You can see some of his books have even been translated in Mandarin. And they just need to tell you what a powerhouse he is. These are the companies he's invested in. He's a venture capitalist. He looks at opportunities but understands technology as well. And once he identifies these opportunities, he harnesses them. So we have a powerhouse of information in our midst today. It's an absolute honor to have here, Roman. Thank you so much for that. So,
well, thank you, Peter.
Roman's going to join us. Then a brief introduction to Mike. He's going to jump in every now and again to give you some insight on what he's doing. Mike is the Director of Data Center and Cloud Sales of America for HP. And he leads a team of cloud sales specialists. So Mike joined HP 7 years ago, where he negotiated telecommunication contracts for the global services network. He's on the cutting edge in one of the redefining characteristics of taking HP to the future, namely the cloud. Massive challenges for HP, seeing that they were in the server space and a lot of the functions that you have in-house on servers now are moving towards the cloud. So how do you position yourself accordingly? And Mike's playing a fundamental role in that taking to market strategy in the cloud environment. He's a graduate of McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, where he's got a degree in anthropology, which I'm glad to know because there's a couple of questions I have on that. So we'll hopefully see if I can reach back tonight. And he's participated in numerous executive development programs throughout the world. He currently lives in Texas, as does Roman, and with his wife Linda, 2 grown children with professional careers in the Texas area. And he has been nominated, we received the Dallas Metropolitan Technology Business Council's Community Hero Award of 2012. Now that's a very, very long title. I don't exactly know what it means, but hopefully you'll tell us.
Sure.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But we're also honored to have Mike all the way from the US, flew in all the way to speak to you guys. So you are truly honored to have these power, these beacons of insight in the world of ICT with you today. And we're looking forward to
Great. Well, thank you, Peter. I have to tell you, it's an honor to be here. I've traveled the world when I was at Nokia, always looking for the next big thing. Now, I will tell you this, we live in an incredible time period. There's been more innovation happening in the past 100 years, and actually in the past 25 years, than throughout the history of mankind. What an incredible time to be alive. But, when we look at innovation, what has really transformed our world is engineering. Because engineering makes ideas come to life. But what I want to talk to you about also is having ideas and being innovative. Because whatever you do, and I know that we have individuals here that are customer retention, which is very, very important. Everything is about the customer. And everything that I do and my companies do is about the customer. I consider myself to be an anthropologist before I am a technologist. And that's important. And my colleague, Michael, is also an anthropologist. It's really important to understand how people live their lives and the products and tools they use in their environments to enhance their lives, to make them more enjoyable, to make them more productive. So by having that understanding of what the people need, what the market needs, we're able to innovate and create new solutions that enhance people's lives and that people want to buy. In other words, they become the customer. So what we're going to talk about are a couple underlying messages. One, everything that any company does and anything that you do has to be focused around the customer or a market need. Now, I'm very fortunate in that I work with some brilliant people. These are people that have fundamentally changed the way we live our lives today. I've been very fortunate that 30 years ago, actually 31 years ago, when I was out of university, I happened upon a new industry called mobile telephone. And this is an industry that in the early days, people said, well, why would I need a mobile phone? Why? I mean, I have a phone at home, I have a phone at office. But at that time, these were car phones. The time between the office and the home and other places that you go, you wanted to stay connected. So we developed car phones, and then as we realized that car phones themselves now had a limitation, because now you're calling a home, you're calling an office, or a place of employment, and now you're calling a car. And we evolved that by taking the car phone and putting it into a briefcase. Then we put it into a smaller case. And I don't know if some of you remember the transportable units. They looked like little lunch boxes. I see Keith shaking his head. So you remember. And then we came out with the handheld devices. They were big. They were clunky. They didn't have much talk time. And you know what? They didn't have any features. They were 10-number memory dialing, recall, and so on. And I realized that, you know, when you have such a very simple device, you need to be able to provide new innovations and enhancements on how people use their device. So being a young product manager for a company called Oki, which was building phones, it was a Japanese manufacturer building phones for the telephone companies in the United States, one of the things that I thought that would simplify the use of this phone is voice technology. And this is in 1984. I was reading an article that the inventors of the Speak and Spell, which was a toy invented by Texas Instruments, and Texas Instruments at one time was a consumer company. They made watches, they made calculators, and so on. Today, it's simply a semiconductor chip house. So these individuals left this company and formed a new company called Voice Control Systems. And what they were doing is enabling voice control of devices. And I said, you know, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could now incorporate this technology into a phone? Where now I no longer have to dial, especially when I'm in a car. I need to keep my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road. And I can just say, dial home. Dial 12345. And you know what? Magically, it worked. And in those days, the voice recognition systems were not as powerful as they are today. I mean, today, we talk to computers. I can make airline reservations. I could do a lot of things. I mean, we all use automated attendance, don't we? And you see how the technology has progressed. What I want to tell you this is that innovation doesn't happen overnight. And at times we think it's revolutionary, but it is evolutionary. It has to evolve, and it takes time. But one thing it does require, it requires people like you in this room who are going to step up to the challenge and look at how you do your job and how can you do it better? How can you improve on the processes? How can you innovate your position? Now, I know some of you are saying, but you know, I'm not a technologist. I'm here to maintain customers, to make sure that they don't churn and go to other carriers, to other sources of products and so on. I can tell you this, when we study the process of innovation, innovation touches every industry. And you know, I flew over from the United States on Virgin Atlantic. And you're all probably familiar with Virgin. Virgin is an incredible brand, and they have a very charismatic founder, Sir Richard Branson. Branson was an exceptional entrepreneur. And what he did was something that was utterly fearless. And he tackled a couple industries, actually several, and he continues to reinvent himself. But he tackled an industry, and I'm going to focus just on one, what brought me here, which was Virgin Atlantic. What he realized is that British Airways was an institution, but they were resting on their laurels. They were not innovating. They were not providing something that's going to be exceptional and something that's going to be new. And he realized too, because he studied customer market trends and he understood human psychology. What he did is, before any of my passengers step foot on my plane, I have to give them a completely new experience. And he did that. He did that in a number of ways. If you were flying upper class, they would have a limousine come and pick you up. And if there was heavy traffic, they had even people on motor scooters come and get you, and then they would pick up your luggage. Innovative. He also realized that when you set foot at the airport, you have, sometimes there's long queues and so on. You need to relax, and he created these clubhouses. When you walked in, they had shoe shine, massage. You could get your nails done. They also knew that, you know, you might be hungry. They had a chef that would prepare a meal. He was also in the music business, and he had an entire catalog of all of his musical acts, so you could now relax and listen to music. And when you set on foot on that airplane, he created a new category of service called business class, which he called upper class. And what he did is he revolutionized an industry. And you might say, but that's not high tech. It's not high tech. But what he did is he understood that people buy an experience. What you need to do is put yourself in that place of Richard Branson. How will you change your customer's experience? That is very, very critical. Now, in the past 25 years, we've seen incredible innovations. The internet. You know, when I went to school, I'm an old guy. I did not have an Apple or a Sony Vaio. I had a typewriter. Do you know how difficult it was to do reports, especially if you made mistakes? I used to have this whiteout, it was this paint that I would put on paper and type over it. How difficult that was. Imagine, I think some of you remember those days. Now, the other thing too is research. I read a lot of books, and I still do. When I was doing term papers and research, do you know I used to live in libraries? And I had to manually go through and search. And we used to have these bibliography cards and so on. Today, technology has made it that I can carry a library in this device. It's all about innovation. Innovation serves. It makes our life better. If we look at the past 25 years of what's been going on, you know, in addition to the internet, the cell phone, probably the second most important discovery, invention of our time. Because it's enabled, as Peter was saying, it places a supercomputer into our pocket, into the palm of our hands. I can appreciate the transformation that took place from the early days when I was a product manager 30 years ago and what we have today. It's completely different. And today, almost every man, woman, and child has a cell phone. You know, I have two kids. I have a 10-year-old son, Alex, and I have a 14-year-old daughter, Grace. And, you know, I talk to my children about how it was when I was a kid growing up, you know, in the 60s. How we had LPs, you know, with maybe 7 or 8 songs on it. You know, I talked about, you know, we had only like 4 TV stations. Imagine that. In my day, an apple was a fruit. Amazon was a river. But to my kids and to their friends, when I say apple, they don't think of a fruit. They think of that device. It's a completely different world that we live in. And I will tell you this, it's an exciting time, and that's what my son tells me. He says, look, he goes, I have a little Apple iPod, and it's got 2,000 songs on it. I have cell phones and devices. I'm able to connect to the internet. My son is an avid hockey player, and he watches all of these videos of, you know, his favorite players, and he tries to emulate them. And what he's done now is he's asked us and his mother videotapes him when he's playing his matches, and he's set it up his own channel. Just like Peter was talking about, he set up his own channel where you could see him play hockey and so on. And that's the world we live in. It's different from the world that I grew up, and it may be different from the world that you grew up. But think of the possibilities, because technology has made the impossible happen. Now, you know, we live in challenging times. We do. But challenging times present opportunity. They present opportunities. And I'll tell you, I wasn't alive at this time period, but probably one of the most challenging times in the modern age was the Great Depression. It was global in nature, yet you had some incredible innovations that took place. Now, we all play internet games. You know, we all play Angry Birds and others and so on. But there's a game that was invented during this time period that I'm sure every one of you have played. It's called Monopoly. Do you play Monopoly? Yeah. That was invented during the Great Depression. Gaming. If you look at the boards, the original pieces and so on, that's from the Great Depression. But you take a look at the pieces, yet they're still relevant. The utilities and the railroad companies, and now we call them transportation and so on. but these are games that are timeless, invented during the Great Depression. Another thing that was invented during the Great Depression, the car radio. We take that for granted. The supermarket. The supermarket was invented during the Great Depression. The electric razor and the chocolate chip cookie. I'm sure you've all had chocolate chip cookies. That was an invention. I illustrate this for a couple of reasons. It's not about being high tech, and it's not only about high tech. It's about no tech. It's about all tech. What are you going to do that will transform your job? How are you going to, I think Pieter said that, there's a possibility that you may lose your job because the world's changing. So I'm going to ask you, how will you redefine yourself? I grew up, and one of the most exciting times too was in the 1990s. And I will tell you, that was a time like in the 1920s, the roaring, millionaires were created overnight. Innovation was flourishing. Ideas were going IPO, becoming listed companies, and were worth billions of dollars. I was involved in that, and I will tell you, off an idea, I went and I've raised $10 million in a 30-minute presentation with no company but an idea. Today, that won't happen, because what we look for are things that are more sustainable and that have a very sustainable business model, and that's what Michael will talk about. But in this time period, in the 90s, and some of you may remember the dot-coms, these were companies that were changing our lives. And one of the things that all companies, I remember, I was a young guy in that time period, everybody said, we need to listen to young people because they're creative, they're energetic, they're passionate. Where is your passion? Where is your creativity? You need to learn from history and pick up the good things and also understand the bad things and what not to do. But in the 1990s, it was a time of euphoria. Great innovations and new companies were emerging that have basically changed the face of our business world, of our technology world, of our entertainment world. This has happened, 15, 18 years ago. What are you going to do that will contribute to this change? More recently, we look at companies that have become global phenomenon. Google is now a verb. Pieter said Netflixing is a verb. Skyping is a verb. These are companies that have been started by people who have imagination, who have creativity, who have passion, and a belief that anything is possible. How will you redefine Altech? How will you propel your company and not only preserve your job, but more importantly, create new jobs, create new values and new experiences for your customers, that they become customers for life? What will you do? Companies like Amazon are redefining themselves. It was a company that was started in the 1990s, basically selling books. Yes, they sell my books too. And I will tell you this, you're all welcome to go online and buy my books. Thank you. But today, they've evolved into a different model. And I know Michael will talk about, Michael, what is Amazon doing now?
So I'm obviously in the IT space, and so kind of a joke, but it's really not that funny. At HP, and same thing is occurring at IBM and Xerox and Dell. I'm in the deal, we do larger enterprise deals, and I said if I had sat in a room 5 years ago and said our largest competitor in the compute space in 5 years will be Amazon, I would have been laughed out of the room. I mean, the online bookseller, that's a joke. Well, they have taken a commanding share in the cloud computing space in the U.S. and are now looking to expand globally. Again, we got caught, and that's one of the challenges when we talk about that companies, and as your company is probably facing that too, is trying to keep up with and adapt to some of the disruptions that occur. So yeah, Amazon is definitely it's disrupting my world daily. If it hasn't hit here, it will.
What do they do differently though?
Okay, good question. And so that's probably interestingly, Greg, because Peter's a very gifted speaker and Roman's a noted author, and we should probably tell the story of how we got to know each other too. So what, to answer your question more directly, what they brought a different mindset to the business, and what I mean by that is they started as an online retailer.
Yep.
So they bring a retail mentality, right? So if retail, I'm assuming is probably, the business model is probably similar here it is than anywhere in the world, right? They typically operate on thin margins, and they're used to price discounting as just a kind of a mindset of whatever you sell this in the store for $5 now, you expect that in a month you're going to sell it for $4.50 and then $4, and it's just kind of the way they approach the business. They're always driving to drive cost out. What they did was they took, because of the cyclical nature of retail, right? Christmas, is the vast majority. So they had these massive data centers to support their retail business. And some smart person in a company that was growing very rapidly said, "Hey, we've got a whole data centers, thousands of square meters of compute capacity that sits idle for much of the year. Why don't we sell that?" And then because they didn't have the constraints of, well, that's not how we do things, they went ahead and started to build it. Then they went to market, and I think it's something like 15 price drops in the last 2 years. For people at HP and IBM, it was like, well, what are you doing? We don't do that. We don't do that, right? So that's some of the things that they've been doing. They just brought a completely different approach, an innovative approach. I mean, compute is compute. Then they set it up and made it very simple and easy. And then from a marketing perspective, what they did differently is they created a development, a sandbox. I'm not sure, IT people here, right? So test dev, right? So they set up test dev in a very easy to use, whip out your credit card, 15, 20 minutes later, you're up and running, and you can test new apps, you can do all kinds of, so they got the developer community just in love with their service, in love with the pricing, and they disrupted the CIOs of enterprise. So everybody familiar with BYOD? Familiar with that? Everybody's familiar with that? Okay. So they did essentially, it was like bring your own compute. And so the CIOs, they didn't know how to control that. So they again, different, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the technology because they're using fairly low-end servers, but the business model, they just completely changed. So are you guys familiar with what, from a cloud computing perspective, I think Dimension Data is probably the big dog here in South Africa. So.
But at the moment now, we're lacking a lot of service providers here, so there's a big opportunity in South Africa to move into that space.
Oh, well, I appreciate you saying that, because that's candidly part of the reason I'm here and have been coming here. I got started coming here a few years ago. Peter mentioned the award was for really doing NGO work, and I was really doing most of that in Mozambique, and then I was spending more time in South Africa, and then watching the numbers that Peter was showing you. And I would come back from the trips and say, that was like getting these accolades, because you're such a good guy, you do this nice charity work, which was great when I said, no, but that's not the real story. The real story are some of the facts and figures that Peter was sharing with you. And that's kind of how Roman and I got together. But yeah, so I think you're right. I think the other thing that cloud computing and that technology represents here and tied to the demographic change is much like wireless. You have the ability to leapfrog from, in the US we still have a lot of copper on the ground. Well, you go to Mozambique or Botswana, Tanzania, they're not gonna, it'd be foolish to put that copper in the ground, because you can use wireless technology to just, I think there's an opportunity in this continent, and starting in South Africa, to do the same thing with compute. Just leapfrog into everything, be cloud-based. And don't build out the legacy data centers that we did in the US and trying to figure out what to do with them. Big iron, we just refer to it as. We had a lot of big iron sitting in data centers. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I agree with you, by the way. I think there's a tremendous opportunity. The challenge for probably you, from what I understand about your company, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're trying to reinvent your company, and so you're facing some of the same challenges that HP is facing. We're trying to reinvent our company. We're trying to redesign and rebuild the airplane in flight, while you've got all these other smaller companies nipping at your heels, and some of the disruptors. So, are you experiencing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we basically bought a few small companies, and now we're flying and try to rebuild this.
Trying to integrate and yeah, no, been there.
Yes.
So,
Okay, so when the dot-com bubble burst, the telecom industry crashed, in 2000, 2001. That was a very challenging time. But yet, even after the bubble crashed, you see incredible companies that came out, the Facebooks, the Skypes, and so on. All of this happens because people want to improve the way people live their lives. And each one of these companies has added a new dimension to how we live our lives. Skype, which was a company that had its origins in Estonia, small little country, Baltic Republic, and the impact it's made. I Skype with my son and my family, my wife and kids, all the time when I travel all over the world. And I do it because it saves me a lot of money, because it's very expensive, yet we're able to do video conferencing and so on. And as a matter of fact, I was showing my son, the hotel, the grounds where I am, and so on. Now I'm able to share and have a shared experience. As I travel all over the world, I stay connected. How technology serves and improves our life. It's truly remarkable. So one thing that I just have a couple more slides here, because I just want to make a couple points. I'm an investor. I'm a venture capitalist. I look for opportunities and I look for disruptive technologies. And opportunities happen everywhere. It's not a Silicon Valley exclusivity that, innovation only happens in Silicon Valley. You've all heard of Silicon Valley, and everybody thinks that, we need to go to California and we need to go to the United States to be successful. You don't. Opportunities are everywhere. Markets are everywhere. Now, I will tell you this. Some of you have more advantages than some of the guys that live in the United States and have started companies. You're all multilingual here. I know Matthew is looking at me strange and saying, how is this possible? Well, I'll tell you, you have enormous opportunities because in your region, as Peter pointed out, in the next several years, this is where the market is. The United States is a mature market. And Europe, in some ways, is a declining market, with populations in certain countries and so on. The same thing in Japan. Where the new growth will be is here, South Africa and Africa. And what an incredible place to be right now. You're on the frontier. You're the pioneers in your market. You understand this market than someone like me who comes in from the United States, because you live here. You're one people. So how will you, in your jobs, reinvent yourself to take advantage of what Pieter was talking about, this enormous market opportunity? You know, I was a student of Pieter Drucker, the father of management. And when I went to school, I was a Drucker disciple. And Dr. Drucker passed away a few years ago, and you know, he was an old man, but he is still relevant because he says that entrepreneurs always search for change and they respond to it and exploit it as an opportunity. Our world is changing. And it's changing not only in Africa, but all over the world. How will you seize on that opportunity? But opportunities are not about lowering costs. It's about creating lasting value. Think of that in anything that you do, and you look at your product lines. It's about creating value. I know a lot of companies will tell you, you know, I'm going to make it cheaper. And I will tell you, that is not sustainable, because someone else will make it cheaper than you. How will you create value? It's about the experience, as I said about Virgin Atlantic and Richard Branson. He created a new experience, and people want value, and they're willing to pay for value. It's not always about the lower price. You know, there's 101 ways to kill a mouse. And a lot of companies focus on their very specific technology and product and saying, you know, I have no competition because what I am doing is patented, it's unique, and no one is doing it like I'm doing it. And you know what? They may be right. And if you look, there's a whole many ways to capture the mouse. But remember one thing. Why do people buy a mousetrap?
Kill mice.
That's right. That's the only purpose. And when you look at that, that's why they buy it. Don't rest on your laurels that what you're doing you think is utterly unique. It may be, but there are other solutions. So I want you to start thinking creatively, that there's 100 ways to kill a mouse, but remember, understand the market. They want to get the mouse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect, and I'm going to turn this over to Michael about a couple of things, but we're here for the next couple of days. And one of the things that we both enjoy, because we're both anthropologists, and I know Pieter is too, because he really understands society, he understands the workings of people, and he also understands market needs. He's a futurist. What we want to do with you is the following. We want to help you potentially to plant the seeds to help redefine you. So you're going to be thinking in new ways. Now, I know you and I are probably the same age, and you're saying, you know, at my age, it's a little difficult, but it's not. I know you're up for the challenge. I know you're up for the challenge as well, Monica. We're going to help you think through some of your problems. We're not going to solve all of your problems, but we're going to give you the tools and put you on a path where you're going to start thinking differently and looking to solve some of the issues that you're faced in your everyday job. You know, I'm an investor. I work with many companies. I've been involved with over 20 startups. And some of these companies now have matured. They're large companies employing thousands of people. And I take great pride in that. But all of these companies have to reinvent themselves every step of the way. Because if you don't reinvent yourself, someone else will reinvent you and make you no longer relevant. You want to be relevant. So, over the next couple days, with your permission, we're going to go through some exercises where we're going to put you together in teams, and we're going to start that innovative process, that creative thinking that you can deploy in your everyday job. How does that sound? Are you excited about it? Now, I know, we're Americans, and you know what they say about Americans, these guys are, well, they're cowboys. Well, we are. We're from Texas. But we're gung-ho, we're enthusiastic, and we want you to be enthusiastic. Because these are, like my son Alex says, truly exciting times to be alive. And the opportunities are endless. And I'm excited to explore them with you. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Michael, or Mike.
Either.